Chapter 7 Conclusions. Jung's main ideas in a new light, a new myth? Hopefully, I have been able to illustrate the importance of Carl Jung's initial fantasies and dreams, documented throughout the Red Book and the Black Books, for the development of Jung's ideas and theories. The contents of the Red Book and the Black Books add a depth and mystery to Jung's ideas, a depth which is hard to comprehend at first, and a depth which requires one to be open to certain more mystic and perhaps unusual ideas and concepts. As Sun Samdasani indicated in the introductory volume of the Black Books, Jung managed to illustrate how humanity could compensate for one of its worst deeds, whereas Zarathustra proclaims the death of God. Liber Novus, the Red Book, depicts the rebirth of God in the soul. Years earlier, in the Gay Science, and thus spoke Zarathustra, Friedrich Nietzsche famously proclaimed the death of God. Nietzsche wrote, "God is dead, but given the way of man, there may still be caves for thousands of years in which his shadow will be sown. We still have to vanquish his shadow too." Nietzsche observed that the idea of the experience of God was losing its momentum, although God did not therefore not die. According to Nietzsche, in a physical sense, God died in a spiritual sense. This phenomenon was the result of several scientific and social development. Throughout his works, Nietzsche criticized religion heavily, most notably for inciting a herd enticing among humanity based on the false idea and there exists a universal morality, a pre-existing God and evil. Religion, according to Nietzsche, made humans believe that they were sinful and thereby made them docile and resentful towards their existence on this planet. Inasmuch as it says God sees into the heart of man, it says nay to the profoundness and most superior desire of life and takes God as enemy of life. The saint in whom God is well pleased, in the ideal in a eunuch, life terminates where the kingdom of God begins. As a result, when Nietzsche proclaimed that God had died, it appeared logical to believe that this death of God can be seen as some sort of victory over these evil forces of religion. Nietzsche himself also hinted to the idea that this was positive development because of the freedom which the death of God would create for humanity. We have left the hand and have embarked. We have burned our bridges behind us. Indeed, we have gone farther and destroyed the land behind us. Hours will come when you will realize that it is infinite and that there is nothing more awesome than infinity. Although the death of God resulted in infinite possibilities and a significant degree of freedom, Nietzsche observed that this was a horrible development because it completely removed all the foundations from the reality of humanity. Oh, the poor bird that felt free and now stuck in a wall of cage. Wow, when you feel homesick for the land as it had offered more freedom and there is no longer any land. As a result, Nietzsche appeared to indicate that the death of God was problematic because there was nothing to replace the idea of God with. The true realization, the madman. In his passage, The Madman Found Within the Gay Science, Nietzsche used the story of madmen to illustrate the far-reaching consequence of death of God. Nietzsche even observed that it was man himself who had killed God. Nietzsche illustrated that man slowly came to the realization of what he had done. The madman jumped into their wilds and pierced them with his eyes. Whether his God. He cried, I'll tell you, you have killed him. You and I, all of us are his murderers. The madman in this story questioned how men could have decided to kill God and from where they received such powers. But now, did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave up the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? At the same time, the madman indicated that by unchaining this world from the sun, God, we are floating aimlessly through space, aimlessly through lives. Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually, backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any ups and downs? Are we not straying through an infinite nothing? Has it not become colder? Is not night continually closing in on us? God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. Nietzsche argued that there was no way for us to comfort ourselves with the realization that we are the murderers of God. Nietzsche questioned whether we, by murdering God, should also not become gods ourselves. At the same time, in terms of vastness of the implications, Nietzsche even described the murder of God as one of our greatest deeds, a deed which would be too vast for us to simple humans. Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? There has never been greater deed. Moreover, Nietzsche illustrated through the story of madmen that humanity is not yet capable to grasp the true implication of this deed. Nietzsche believed that the true effects are still revealing themselves years later. This tremendous event is still on its way, still wandering. It was not yet reached the ears of men. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars require time. Deeds, though done, still require time to be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than the more distant star, and yet they have done it themselves. Thus spoke Zarathustra. Nietzsche also pointed to the implications of death of the idea of God. According to Nietzsche, the realization of the death of God resulted in the aimless wandering of humanity, a situation in which still existence at present. O my brethren, is not everything at present in flux? Have not all railing and gangways fallen into the water? Who would still hold on to good and evil? The new false idols. Throughout thus spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche indicated that man attempted to fill the void left after death of God, which is admiration of several new idols. The state was one such new idol according to Nietzsche. The state attempted to replace the God of idea of God by becoming the most important entity in existence. On earth there is nothing greater than the state. It is I who am the regulating finger of God. Thus roareth the monster, yea, it findeth you ought to, yea, conqueror of the old God. However, Nietzsche observed that the idea of the state would never be able to replace the meaning provided by the idea of God. Instead, it merely uses the idea of God to justify its action. The state, I call it, where are poison drinkers, the good and the bad, the state where all lose themselves, the good and the bad, the state where the slow suicide of all is called life. Another false idol, according to Nietzsche, was the life of the last man, a life characterized by several short, meaningless pleasures, while all hardship have been eradicated. The last men are no longer capable to comprehend some of the most meaningful aspects of life, but they are still convinced of their own happiness. What is life? What is creation? What is longing? What is a star? So asketh the last man, and blinketh. His species is ineradicable, like that of the ground flea. The last man liveth longest. We have discovered happiness, say the last men, and blink thereby. The rebirth of the soul. After concluding the idea of the God and died and realizing the impact of the death of God had on humanity, Nietzsche nostalgically looked at upon the time of our old master, ancient humanity. Nietzsche indicated that we can no longer comprehend the way in which ancient people understood their lives with the idea of God in their mind. All experiences sown differently because a God sown through them all decisions and perceptives on the remote future too, for they had oracles and secret portents and believed in prophecy. Truth was experienced differently, for the insane could be accepted formally as the mouthpiece which makes us shudder and laugh. People behaved differently according to Nietzsche because they constantly lived with the idea of God in their mind. Therefore, fear and joy were experienced differently. Even wrong had a different effect on man's feeling. For once feared divine retribution and not merely a civil punishment and dishonor. That was joy in ages when one believed in the devil and tempers. Nietzsche, of course, was also not a big proponent of the implications which living with this idea of God had. However, he believed that after eradicating his idea, we have not yet come up with something better. The question that we may then ask is whether we can come up with something which can sufficiently compare to the idea of God. Is a rebirth of the idea of God or something of similar weight possible? When will all this shadow of God cast to darken our mind? When will we complete our deification of nature? When may we begin to naturalize humanity in terms of a pure, newly discovered, newly redeemed nature? As Nietzsche illustrated, man requires a certain amount of chaos in order to give birth to dancing stars. I tell you, one must still have chaos in one to give birth to a dancing star. I tell you, yea, have still chaos in you. Jung explored a new kind of chaos, a chaos found within. Jung was willing to let chaos consume him, at least for a significant amount of time. The discoveries Jung made depict, as some the sign indicated, a rebirth of God within the soul. This is not God in a literal sense. Instead, it is a rebirth of something similar to the idea of God. A God which has previously been murdered by man, but has now been resurrected by the effort of a single man, Jung. As indicated earlier, Joseph Campbell observed that mysteries on our planet have been solved to a certain extent. They are no longer capable of humbling our ego to a sufficient degree. As Campbell observed, man is the new, true, crucial mystery. Man is that alien presence with whom the forces of egoism must come to terms. Jung succeeded in humbling his own ego and managed to illustrate to everyone, why our ego is but a small tip of iceberg, an iceberg hiding the top of the depths of our soul. However, despite their relative unimportance in this regard, our egos have become big enough for them to be capable of destroying our entire planet. Whether it is done by cutting down rainforest, destroying entire species of animals, or simply sending our entire planet into oblivion after the touch of a button. As mentioned previously, Jung observed that Nietzsche's truth was important for those whose ego requires more confidence, but that another truth was necessary for those whose ego requires more constraint. Between 1418 and 1427, Thomas Kempis, a Dutch-German medieval author, wrote a book called The Imitation of Christ. Thomas A. Kempis argued that anyone who truly wants to live a religious life based on the teaching of Christ should imitate the life of Christ. Anyone who wished to understand the savour of words of Christ to the full must try to make his whole life conform to the pattern of Christ's life. According to Thomas A. Kempis, this should be done by focusing on one's inner life. Years later, Jung would refer to the imitation of Christ in his Black Books. Jung questioned whether we should imitate the life of Christ in a literal sense or whether we should imitate his life in another way, meaning that we should imitate Christ in the sense that he sought and lived his own truth, a truth which will be different and unique for everyone. The purpose of imitation of Christ would therefore be the same for everyone. The outcome, however, would differ according to everyone's personality. In Psychotherapy and the Cure of Soul, Jung wrote in 1932, "We are to understand the imitatio Christi in the sense that we should copy his life and, in a certain manner, ap his stigmata, or in the deeper sense that we are to live our own proper life as truly as he lived his in its individual uniqueness." Jung certainly was a proponent of this deeper meaning of relation to the imitatio Christi. According to Jung, the development of one's individual uniqueness may be one of the most important development of one's life. An important part, however, of one's individual uniqueness lay waiting to be discovered within the depth of the uniqueness. Few people have been able to journey to this depth. Most never try and remain ignorant of unconscious, and some never make it back. Jung, however, managed to venture into the depth of unconscious and eventually managed to make it back into the real world as well. Moreover, albeit years after his death, Jung's experiences were shared with the world through the publication of his documentation of his journey in the Red Book and the Black Books. To Joseph Campbell, this would be the successful conclusion to the journey of the archetypal hero. The hero comes back from his mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. Jung's endeavor provided him unbeknownst to the most people with enough material to continue to bestow boons for the rest of his life. Jung made sure that he rooted his discoveries in science, thereby remaining a credible and respected scholar. By doing so, Jung provided us with such an enormous amount of information of the unconscious that a long and dangerous journey into the depths of unconscious is not necessarily required for those interested in understanding the unconscious process. At the same time, as illustrated multiple times throughout his books, Jung observed that a split between an individual's conscious and unconscious is not only dangerous to the individual but also to the entire society. If such a separation is widespread, it can even lead to mass psychosis, according to Jung, since a lack of symbolic ideas connection to the conscious to the unconscious is a hotbed for the development and growth of dangerous idea. Jung believed that the relativity on its own is not the sufficient match against such ideas. As Joseph Campbell indicated as well, it is not society that will save the individual, but the individual that can save society, not by venturing out into the wilderness of the world, but by coming to grip with one's inner opposites. As a result, a new myth for the 21st century is required. As discussed throughout this book, such a myth can no longer be found in external object, but must be found within. Jung dedicated his life to the exploration of the mythical realms present within the psyche. At the same time, Jung emphasized it is important to keep open mind and not limit ourselves too much by our conscious intentions. I believe that through his exploration and the subsequent documentation of discoveries made during this exploration, Jung essentially formed a new kind of myth, a myth based on the mysteries of the soul. In this sense, Jung demonstrated how the long lost soul of humanity can be reborn. When we consider again the definition of myth provided by Joseph Campbell, then it becomes clear how this definition can be applied to Jung's comfort. According to Campbell, myths are production of the human imagination, their image subsequently, though derived from the material world and its supposed history, are like dreams, relation of the deepest hope, desire and fears, potentialities and conflict of the human will, which in turn is moved by energies of the organs of the body operating vigorously against each other and in concert. Every myth, that is to say, whether or not by intention, is psychologically symbolic. Its narratives and images are to be read, therefore, not literally but as metaphors. The content of the soul provides us with metaphors which can help us comprehend our deepest hopes and fears. The mysteries of the soul are common among all people, even though their actual content might differ in accordance with everyone's individual nature. Similar images are presented to all. An essential part, therefore, of the idea of rebirth of the soul is the uniqueness of each and every individual. Jung encouraged each and everyone to explore the contents of his or her own unconscious and draw their own conclusion. The myth of the soul is therefore characterized by a sort of individual uniqueness. However, instead of this difference leading to further polarization, Jung concluded that it would not only result in ever-increasing amount of harmony between distinct individuals. Jung indicated that this would be the case because individuals would be able to face the world undivided, whereby inner division, due to disconnection between the conscious and unconscious contents of the psyche, would no longer be projected upon the external world, as Joseph Campbell indicated. It is necessary for man to understand and be able to see that through various symbols the same redemption is revealed. The way to become human is to recognize the lineaments of God in all of the wonderful modulation of the face of man. In my opinion, Jung's focus on the discovery of every individual's uniqueness provides a refreshing reminder in our current age that no one should be capable of deciding for another individual how he or she should think. Jung's theories illustrate the relative unimportance of polarizing ideologies or other divisive political ideas in the face of each and everyone's individual uniqueness. According to Jung, being told how to feel or think or telling others how to do so is extremely dangerous, since the eclipsed soul will thereby be left in the dark. The rebirth of the soul can only be achieved through a relentless exploration of one's own self, including the less desirable aspects. My soul, where are you? Do you hear me? I speak. I call you. Are you there? I have returned. I am here again. I have shaken the dust of all the lands from my feet, and I have come to you. I am with you after long years of long wandering. I have come to you again. Should I tell you everything I have seen, experienced, and drunk in? Or do you not want to hear about all the noise of life and the world? But one thing you must know. The one thing I have learned in that one must live this life. Do you still know me? How long the separation lasted, everything has become so different. And how did I find you? How strange my journey was. What words should I use to tell you on what twisted paths a good star has guided me to you? Give me your hand, my almost forgotten soul. How warm the joy in seeing you again, you long disavowed soul. Life has led me back to you. Let us thank the life I have lived for all the happy and all the sad hours, for every joy, for every sadness. My soul, my journey should continue with you. I will wander with you and ascend to my solitude. Carl Jung, 1913.